Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamie Torres. I'm the councilperson for District 3 in West Denver. I really want to thank you for tuning in today. This was kind of our first attempt at doing a neighborhood update meeting. And because this is such an important topic, safety and connecting with our police district 4, we wanted to make sure it was inclusive of a number of different council districts. What prompted this meeting was really a noticeable increase in safety issues during the stay-at-home order, including gun violence. We thought it would be a good idea to connect with Commander Fleeks and his team to get an update and answer some hot topic questions. So we've gathered some questions from our office as well as Council District 2 and 7. Just an update that this meeting is being simultaneously interpreted into Spanish. So keep a slow and steady pace to your speaking, myself included, so that they can appropriately translate. I want to thank my staff. All three are on this call today: Daisy Rocha Vasquez, Melissa Mejia, and Ben Chavez. Daisy will be help moderating the chat box. So any questions that you want to pose, please put into the chat. There's also a little hand raise option because we have a number of people on the call. If you'd like to chime in so that we can take you off mute, raise that little hand. Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to kick off to my colleagues, council members Kevin Flynn and Jolyn Clark, for their introductions.
All right, well, thank you, Councilwoman Torres, and I want to thank you and your office, particularly Daisy, but also Ben and Melissa for putting this together. There's so much that has happened in the 3 of our districts, and because we're all in Police District 4, thank you to Commander Fleece for being here, and especially I want to thank Division Chief Ron Thomas for participating in this also. The response that we had in Marlee to the double homicide that occurred on Tennyson Street and the 3 shootings at occupied residences shortly before that was really welcomed by the folks in Marlee. I know the citywide impact team came down, canvassed the neighborhood, and made a lot of good contacts, and hopefully that paid off, and we'll go forward from here. But I'm looking forward to having this conversation with the community and seeing what else is it that we can do as a city to help secure our neighborhoods and have families be safe. Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman.
And Jolyn Clark, District 7, I will echo thank you, Councilwoman Torres, for all your work on this. And huge thank you to our DPD team, to the commander and everybody from DPD District 4 and our entire district for everything that you're doing right now. You all put your lives on the line for us every day, and that's never easy, but it's certainly not easier now, also risking infection from COVID-19. And I know that whenever we've had issues and requests, you've been extremely responsive and dealing with a very hard situation. So thanks again for taking time, not just today, but every day for us. Also on the Zoom today is Anita from my team, who I see some District 7 residents faces popping up, who all know that Anita is the brains of the operation in District 7. And so thanks, Anita, for being here, for everything that you also do for all of the residents on our side of Federal Boulevard. But glad to be here and to get an update from DPD, and thanks for everyone for making time to do it.
And if I could, thank you, Councilman, for mentioning that. I should have mentioned that my aide, Dana Montano, is also on the call here. Thank you.
Very good. I know that we are also joined by Mariah Guerrero, who's representing Representative Senator Gonzalez Gutierrez's office. Mariah, did you want to make a quick introduction?
Hi, thank you, Councilwoman Torres. Hi, everyone. My name's Mariah. I'm here on behalf of Rep. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Fortunately, she had another meeting at this time and was unable to make it. I'm going to put her information in the chat for everyone. If you do want to reach out to her, our office is more than willing and able to help.
Thank you, Mariah. We're also joined by Denver Public School Board member Angela Cobian. Angela, do you want to make a quick intro?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Torres, for inviting me. I'm glad that I'm able to join. My name is Angela Cobian, and I represent Southwest Denver on the Denver Board of Education. My connection to this topic is that outside of having friends Denver in the Hathmar Park neighborhood, is now seeing some of my former students be involved in different areas of the city. Last summer, I worked with the y'all at Denver Public Schools, which is Young African American Latinx Leaders, to put together a youth forum that we did with Chief Pazan on the curfew policy. So I'm really interested in hearing about what's been going on and how I can circle this back to our superintendent, our board, and our chief of safety.
Thank you so much. I'll kick it over now to Commander Fleeks, if you want to introduce any of your team as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us on this today, taking time from your day. We really appreciate the opportunity. Special thanks to members of council. I know that they put a lot of work into making this happen. Daisy, Councilwoman Torres. Appreciate the opportunity. It's been a tough couple of months for us, and actually for everybody, right? You all too. Trying to get through this. You know, the communication has been affected, the connectivity of not only us as individuals, but from a police department perspective with the community. So it's been challenging to find ways to, you know, to try to connect with people like we're used to connecting. And that hasn't been easy. I think taking advantage of opportunities like this are important. Chief Thomas, I think, already introduced himself. We've got Lieutenant Brad Qualley, who is one of my 4 lieutenants in District 4. And geographically, he's responsible for everything north of Mississippi. So it's really what we call Sector 1 geographically. Brad will have more to say in a little bit about some of the topics in the question and answer. So I'm going to start out talking just a little bit about crime and what's been going on here recently. What we've seen in District 4 so far this year, and really how it compares to what's going on throughout the city. And we really aren't that much different from the things that we've been seeing in the crime trends. We've been paying a lot of attention to what's been going on the past couple of months. You know, as we entered the pandemic, as we entered the lockdowns, you know, school being released early, a lot of things happening on social media, things that really, I think, have contributed and led to increased criminal activity in some cases. But there's a couple of crime categories that I'm going to talk about right now that I'm going to give you a percentage as far as where we're at this year in District 4. Violent crime is one of them and property crime is the other. When I talk about percentages and how we compare to crime that's gone on in the past, what we do is during any given period throughout the year, we compare where we're at as far as crime goes with the previous 3 years that have come before this. The comparison is always the same. So year to date, you know, we're through midpoint in May. So every comparison that you're going to hear as far as crime compares to those years before, but we do take the average of 3 years. We think it's a more accurate way to look at things rather than you know, pay attention to the ebbs and flows that we see year to year sometimes. For violent crimes, what we've seen this year is we're actually down a little bit. Now, violent crime includes murder, serious assaults, robberies, sex offenses. We're actually down just a little bit over 2%. So far this year, property crimes includes burglaries, thefts, motor vehicle thefts, theft from motor vehicles, criminal mischief type of offenses where, you know, houses or cars are damaged, things like that. We're actually down about 6% in that category. So we're holding steady. However, there are 3 crime categories that we've actually seen increases so far this year. And when I talk about that comparison to the city, other parts of the city are seeing the same things. The first one is aggravated assault, so serious assaults that involve a gun or a firearm. We are actually up 28% for the year. Again, it's that comparison. And to give you a little perspective of the aggravated assaults with a gun, the increase that we see in that 28% really amounts to 23 crimes or 23 victims. And when we talk about aggravated assaults, we count each victim as a crime. So if that makes sense. So if there's, and to give you an example, if we have a group of people, for instance, standing at a bus stop, or maybe they're standing outside of a bar, and somebody approaches that group and either flashes a gun or a knife or something that makes them feel like their lives are threatened, and say that there's 8 people in that group. If that happens, there's 8 crimes that have just happened in that particular occurrence. So I'll give you a little bit of perspective of how those are counted. We had, and you know, I think Councilwoman Torres, you talked about, referenced the increase in gun-related crime, and a lot of that we've seen over the last couple of months. We had a very, very tough month in April. We actually had 5 drive-by shootings where, you know, for whatever reason, many of them have been kind of gang-related, not necessarily motivated by gang, but involving gang members that we know about. But there were 5 of those drive-by shootings, plus in addition to the double homicide that we had on South Tennyson during the month of April. There was a week span within that month, and it happened between the 19th and the 25th, where we actually had 18 victims of an aggravated assault with a gun. And again, you go back and look at, put that in a little bit of perspective. 12 of those 18 victims happened in 2 incidents. And I know that, you know, there was one house had shots fired into their particular household. There were 8 people inside that house. Fortunately, nobody was hit, but still accounted for 8 different crimes. So the second trend that we've been seeing as far as an increase in District 4 is motor vehicle theft. We have not seen that district-wide. It's just been in the southern part of the district, and you've got really 4 neighborhoods that are accounting for that. It's Marston, Harvey Park South, Fort Logan, and the Bear Valley area. And we're actually up just a little bit over 17% with motor vehicle theft. Most of it is attributed to those particular areas down there. And I'll talk a little bit about the things that we're doing to combat that in a minute. The third and final category that we're actually seeing increases, and again, this is not just in District 4, but we've seen this citywide. We actually started seeing this in March, where it's an increase in business burglaries. Most of those have happened overnight. I think some of the things that have contributed to that are the businesses being closed temporarily, many of them. You know, certain individuals finding opportunity and even during the day sometimes breaking into businesses where they know nobody is going to be there or paying attention. There was at one point, and I think this is pretty reflective of the entire city. By the first week of April, we in District 4 were about 60% above average with our business burglaries. Pretty substantial increase. We spent a lot of time over the course of the past 30 to 40 days with high visibility patrols, with checking on businesses. We're very data driven, so when we look at whatever crime is happening, whether it be motor vehicle theft or burglaries or even violent crime, we look for data or look at data for help and deployment of our resources. With business burglaries, it was no different. We looked at you know, what specific areas within our district that we were having issues with and seeing those big increases. And we looked at the times most of those crimes were occurring. And so what we did is we kind of reallocated some resources. We got some additional resources from downtown. We also reallocated some within the district to spend time during those specific hours to provide visibility more than anything else. And again, we've been able to decrease that crime in a month's time. We've taken 20% off of that. So doing well. We'll continue to look at that. But again, the increases and the trends that we've been seeing, and I think a lot of lot of these trends, I think, point to and can be attributed to the lockdown and going through this pandemic. But ag assaults, particularly gun-related crimes throughout the city, are up. Motor vehicle theft, burglary, theft from motor vehicle in other parts of the city. We really haven't seen all that much of an increase down here in our district. Just a couple of things so everybody gets an impression of how we're addressing these things. Let's start with aggravated assaults. And really, it starts with our response at the scene and also the investigations that the steps that are taken after that. And I can tell you, between our homicide unit, dealing with what went on down there on South Tennyson, the gang unit investigators that are responsible for investigating the gang-related crime, even our detectives down in District 4 that we have, they're doing a tremendous job. There's, I talked about that increase of the shootings in the month of April, and there were 6 high-profile incidents that happened during that month. And I can tell you, in 5 of the 6, we've made substantial steps investigatively. Either we've made arrests or we've executed search warrants on homes, on cell phones, identified and interviewed suspects, key witnesses that may be somehow associated with suspects. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of success with that too. And the reason that's important is because I think the sooner that you can hold somebody accountable, that may be involved in a certain crime, especially a serious crime like that, it tends to stifle retaliation and those things that can happen afterwards. We've increased our patrols, high visibility patrols. We know the locations that we have to pay attention to, that some of this crime, especially the violent crime, is emanating from. So, it's part of kind of a precision policing type of a strategy to be able to send not only our officers who are answering calls for service, but also our proactive units to point them in the right direction on who and where they need to pay attention to. So we do a lot of that. I think somebody had mentioned, Councilman Flynn, I think, the community outreach. We have a citywide impact team, I think made up of 6 officers and a sergeant. So after that shooting, we had a series of 3 incidents in Marlee. We had one on South Utica, South Stewart, and also the street shooting in the 1600 block of Tennyson. That can be very traumatic to a community. The people that live in that community next door, a block over, very troublesome. And I think one of the things that we've been able to do so well, especially with that city impact team, is they went in after that series of 3 incidents that happened within a week of each other, and they knocked on over 70 homes. And purpose of that is just outreach, connecting with the residents who live in that area that were affected by those crimes, providing them with resources that they can actually reach out to if they're having, or anybody in the family is having some trauma associated with those. So that was done, and there's a couple of organizations that we work with too, and one is actually within the city and county. It's the Gang Reduction Initiative of Denver, it's GRID. And the other one is the Denver Dream Center that we do a lot of work with. They have outreach workers that work with the families of those involved many times. Their focus and concentration is to support and also to prevent that retaliatory violence that tends to happen so often with those types of incidents, especially when it involves gang members and some of those incidents. So there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes. It's been very quiet, fortunately, for the month of May when it comes to the gun violence. So hopefully that continues into the summertime. We know that we're going to have some issues and challenges to deal with, but we'll continue to do that. The motor vehicle theft, we've got, I mentioned that southern part of the district where we've been seeing the motor vehicle theft, and there's actually, if you look at all those neighborhoods down south, there's 4 different hotspots that we've been able to identify. And again, it all goes back to data, trying to figure out, okay, trying to figure out where these micro hotspots are that we can go in and we can provide community outreach and education to the people who live in those areas. Many of them have vehicles that are targeted a lot. They're very high risk. So we provide information on those types of trends. We offer clubs to anybody who wants one within those, who has ownership of any of those vehicles. We do a good job down here, I think, in District 4. We have a couple of impact teams, proactive teams, that actually go out and they pay very close attention to our offenders and the people who we arrest, sometimes multiple times during any given period for motor vehicle theft. So there's a lot of attention paid to that side of it. We do, again, a lot of community education and outreach, letting people know that they live in an area that's being targeted right now, and here's the steps that you need to take to protect yourself. I'll say the same thing for the burglaries. I touched on that just a little bit. Most of those burglaries, those business burglaries, were occurring overnight. Again, it's just saturation patrol, high visibility in those particular areas that we're having those types of issues. Let me move on real quick, and I'll address a couple of other items on the agenda, and then we can get into the Q&A. But fireworks was one of them, and I've been here almost 5 years in District 4. And when I first got here 5 years ago, I learned very quickly that fireworks was a very, very controversial subject in District 4. There's a lot of it, around that July 4th time. For whatever reason, I think Southwest Denver sees more in the way of fireworks than virtually any other part of the city. And the way I know this is I measure complaints. I look at the complaints that, that are phoned in by citizens and residents having to deal with that activity, and we're always higher than other parts of the city. So we knew that we had to do some things differently. And although it's an impossible task to ask to eradicate fireworks, that's a virtual impossibility, I think, but unless other steps are taken. But we started doing a lot of community education outreach to let residents know, citizens know what the legal repercussions are of lighting fireworks, and even more importantly, maybe than that, the dangers associated with fireworks, and also the impact that it has on the community, because there are individuals that live in the community, that live within these blocks, that suffer from PTSD. There's pets that are deathly afraid of those noises, and to ask those households to deal with that activity over a period of 2 to 3 weeks is asking a lot. And that's the type of information that we try to put out to, especially to those areas that we're getting a lot of complaints from. We actually created and distributed some fireworks door hangers. I think that helps us if we get a complaint from, let's say, somebody in a particular block, but we don't have any other information to go on, and oftentimes we get these complaints in for fireworks, and understandably, people just want to report that, hey, it's going on in my block, or it's going on down the street. But it's hard, I think, most of the time to get people to actually sign a complaint for obvious reasons. I mean, it creates issues and tensions with neighbors and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we can do, and we actually developed a fireworks tip line that we use specifically to District 4. And I can give that out right now. It's 720-913-7989. We'll start that towards the last week of June. And so what it allows people to do is to call into that number, even anonymously. If you want to report somebody in your block, a specific location, even a name, we'll act on that. We'll be very proactive. So a lot of times if we just go knock on the door of somebody like that and let them know, hey, we're getting these complaints, we hear it may be coming from you, sometimes that's enough to stop it. Other times it's not. Other times you have to issue citations. We're only able to do that if we actually see who's setting it off, or we have somebody else that is willing to point in the direction of an individual too, that says, hey, you know, they were the ones setting it off, and I'm willing to testify to that in court. So there's a lot that we do with fireworks. We'll do the same thing this year as we've done in years past. The final thing I want to talk about really quickly, and I know that there's a lot of individuals on right now that have a partnership and a grant. A couple of years ago, we were awarded, District 4, we put in for this grant, the police department did, a community-based crime reduction grant, and we were awarded that through the Department of Justice a couple of years ago. There's a lot of things that have to happen leading up to the implementation of that grant, but essentially it's a 3-year, $1 million grant. We picked the community of Westwood for that for a lot of different reasons. And one of the most important being that if you look at the community of Westwood, it is surrounded by 6 other neighborhoods that actually touch it, right? You've got Barnum and Barnum West to the north. You've got Valverde up in the corner. You've got Athmar, Ruby Hill, Marley that come around to the south. And if you look at those 6 neighborhoods and you compare them directly with Westwood, take the average of the crime going on in those 6 communities, Westwood compared to the average of all those other 6 is 145% higher in violent crime. And it's 75% higher in property crime. And that's just by walking across one of those major streets. It's Alameda to the north, Mississippi, Federal and Sheridan frame it to the east and the west. And so that's a large part of why we picked that community. There's a lot of other things that we want to try to do there. Goals are to reduce the number of crimes, the rate of crimes that are committed with guns. Westwood is it's probably our highest community that experiences gun violence in all of District 4. So we're looking at reducing that. Looking at reducing crimes with motor vehicle theft and theft from motor vehicle. We also want to improve the relationships between the community and the police department. A lot of youth engagement built into this grant. There's an opportunities provision working with Mikasa, who is one of our cross-sector partners, working with the Boys and Girls Club over there off Kentucky. Steve Martinez and his crew do such a great job over there. Buku West, the Denver Housing Authority, working with Stella and her folks. Over in Westwood, the Denver Indian Center is part of that. Grid, boy, there's just so many. Mikasa, I mentioned them. The Southwest Denver Coalition, Westwood Unidos, Paul Casey and his group. So there's a lot of community organization. The title of the grant is community-based. So that is really what the focus is working on the resources within that community, trying to get the residents involved as much as we can, as much prevention, education that we can do. So that's what we're looking to do over the next probably 2.5 years. We're very, very close to the implementation of this grant. We've been doing a lot of work in the planning stages, including a community survey that we put out to get input from the community on what their priorities are and what they see as high needs within that community, just so we're applying the right strategies over the next couple of years. So unless there's any questions about that, we can get into the Q&A, but I'll turn it back over to Councilwoman Torres.
Thank you, Commander. That was a really comprehensive rundown. I really appreciate it. We've got time for some Q&A. I do want to mention that the survey that you mentioned for Westwood, the safety grant, is extended through the end of May, I believe. So we'll try to drop that link into the chat here for folks, and we'll definitely put it up on our Facebook page. And I know it's already been shared out to the Westwood RNO, but if you haven't seen it yet, we can definitely get it to you.
I also want to mention too, I see Sophia Chavez on the line, and Sophia with Denver Health, and Father Dang with the Little Saigon Business District and the Denver Streets Partnership are part of that as well. So Sorry, guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I saw Cindy Ams is also on the
Cindy, yes.
on the today's event. So thank you all. Daisy, do you want to mention some of the questions that have come through the chat that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I did get a question regarding statistics. Are there statistics on what percentage of the aggravated assaults are between people who have a history / connection to each other versus stranger assaults?
Yes, I don't have them in front of me, but certainly we can pull that information. Yeah, and many. I mean, when you look at aggravated assaults or even simple assaults, there's a large portion of those that happen within families, within people that know each other. Sometimes domestic violence is part of that, family-related arguments and things that balloon up too. So we do have data that can frame that. I just don't have it in front of me.
Commander, one of the questions that we had earlier on is if you can address how shot spotters work and the cost of expanding those.
Chief Thomas, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I can do that. So basically, the shot spotter is a system. It's a percussion system that basically triangulates the sound of gunfire and can give us a pretty good, usually within about 25 meters or less of the location where gunshots were actually fired. It's helpful. You know, there's actually some national data that shows that a large percentage of shots fired calls aren't even called in by community members. So this, you know, makes sure that we're made aware of those incidents so that we can respond. Often we're able to respond quickly and apprehend people that have fired shots or are carrying weapons. So I think we have 5 shot spotter networks throughout the city. The one that services District 4 in particular is the west coverage area, and it actually ranges. We don't really like to give out exact locations for how far it ranges, but basically it covers parts of District 2 or District 1 and District 4. So roughly Colfax down to about Mississippi. So I know there's been some discussion about expanding it further south, potentially to Yale. And so having engaged the company to see what that would cost, the cost is roughly $250,000 startup, and then it will be another approximately $200,000 annually to maintain that system over that coverage area.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. We did get a question earlier on. If somebody can just quickly describe the difference between reporting non-emergency versus crime in progress.
Lieutenant Quell, you want to take that? Right there? There you go.
Sure. I was having an issue with getting me unmuted. I had to click it a bunch of times. Sorry about that. So we do have actually 3 different ways of reporting. We have our 311 system that we use that can definitely be used for non-emergency, but that encompasses things like recycling graffiti, abandoned vehicles, things like that. A real general reporting aspect that people can use is 311, and it works perfect. The non-emergency is anything that it can be in progress, but most of the time it's for non-in-progress call, non-emergent calls. In progress that could be non-emergent is like someone at Walmart has someone shoplifting but already in custody, so they have them there, so that would be a non-emergent type call. Accidents without injuries are a non-emergent type call. The emergency or 911, as folks hear it, is for any type of emergency call that's actually in progress, shootings, stabbings, anything violent we want to come to right away. But one thing that we do also suggest that is when we're speaking with the folks out in the public is that if you see something in your driving, we don't want you looking up and it's something that's non-emergent. Don't looking up the phone number in your phone. Just go ahead and dial 911 and then we'll refer you to a call taker that can get you an officer to respond to your location. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
Thank you, Lieutenant. A clarification on data, Commander. When you mentioned that Westwood is 145% higher than the average of the other neighborhoods combined, is that what the data point was, or did we get that wrong? Oh, and you're on mute. Let's unmute you. Let's unmute the commander. There we go.
There you go. So yeah, no, that's right. The 6 neighborhoods that surround Westwood, and there are 6 of them. If you take all the crime that happens in those 6 neighborhoods and average it, and then compare that average directly with the one neighborhood of Westwood, that's what you get. And those averages too, I mean, it's not, that just hasn't been a 1 or 2 year thing. That's gone on over a period of many, many years. And it's amazing really how consistent it is year to year.
Yeah. I do want to mention we've got Joey Pace and Patrick Hedrick on the event today, and they forwarded out an announcement of a gun violence prevention virtual town hall, which will be taking place on Thursday, May 28th. Joey or Patrick, do either of you want to let folks know what that's about?
This is Joey. Yeah, so it's the Denver Mayor's Youth Commission, which is a commission of 20 youth and 8 adults, will be hosting a gun violence forum for young people. They've worked hard over the year to survey over 700 of their peers in the Denver Public School District around how gun violence has impacted them. So this is kind of their end of the year event where they're going to have a panel. They've got Chief Payson confirmed. They'll have representation from Denver Health, National Partners Cities United, as well as youth from communities. They have been receiving questions in advance from young people around issues around gun violence, be it violent crime or suicide. So the whole purpose of it is, one, to really get young people involved with creating some of the solutions. Their end goal at the end of the day is to do a call to action for young people. So they're working on what that call to action would look like for young people over the summer in regards to reducing gun violence. So that's what it's about. We'll be glad to send that out. It's very much youth focused. We're asking to share it with as many young people as possible. Pat, is there anything else? And Pat is helping support this with the city's larger youth violence prevention roundtable. Anything you want to add to that, Pat?
No, Joey, man, I think you've covered everything on that piece of it. If I could, Councilwoman, just real quick, I'll give a brief update on the work of the Youth Violence Prevention Action Table that Mayor Hancock convened back in December of 2019. If you're not aware of that, that group is initially we are looking at internal systems, so city agencies and city partners like DPS, like state probation and some of our federal partners. And the real goal of this group is to try to improve internal alignment around these efforts, and with an initial focus on gun violence. But the ultimate goal of the action table is to create a comprehensive youth violence prevention plan that addresses not only gun violence, but as Joey mentioned, suicide, peer-to-peer violence, interpersonal violence, human trafficking, looking at all these different aspects of violence and how do we create a comprehensive plan. So phase 1, it's really kind of divided up in phases. Phase 1 has been really focused on city and city partners. And that was really deliberate, in part because what we felt like was happening was a lot of efforts, they just weren't always coordinated. And so how do we get better alignment so that we can leverage our existing resources the best way possible, which right now in particular with budget crisis and everything else, that's really incredibly important. So we're still working on that piece. Phase 2 is really then how do we engage not only community, but community-based organizations that are doing this work on a day-to-day basis. As we say, that these are the boots on the ground that are doing this work. We had planned some community forums, but then COVID hit, and so obviously we couldn't do those. We still plan on doing those because obviously that's an important aspect for the city to understand from community as well as these CBOs, what can the city do and how can the city best support these organizations. So one of the things that we've done, and Joey was really instrumental in this piece of it, is every Friday there's a call with about 20 or so different youth serving agencies. And I see a few folks from GRID that are on the call as well too on those Fridays. Some of our other community partners. Initially, that call started to say, how can we support you guys? You guys are on the front lines. How is your, resiliency holding up? Because as many of you guys know, these outreach workers put themselves out there all the time. And quite frankly, a lot of times probably take care of others before they take care of themselves. So it was an opportunity to say, how can we support you? When COVID hit, we still maintain that sort of self-care approach, but we've also done some surveying with them to see what is the impact to you overall. Are you looking at a reduction in services, reduction in staff because of COVID, and really trying to lean into it as much as we can to help support them overall. And lastly, I will say that the city does have a micro grant application that's out right now to help address youth violence in Denver. I can send the link to you, Councilwoman Torres, to kick out to folks. That due date is May 29th. We've extended it because obviously with social distancing changes and things like that happening, programs may have to change. And this was initially a partnership with DPS, where the city and DPS came together and put each $100,000 into a pot to do this programming overall. I believe at this point, DPS is trying to figure out how they're going to do theirs, because obviously with school out, it makes it a little bit more of a challenge, but they are committed to it. And Superintendent Cordova and her team have been really great partners in this effort. But the city funds will go out, and we've extended the deadline to give people an opportunity maybe to adjust their proposals, knowing that they may not be able to have face-to-face contact, and we may have to do some more virtual pieces of it. And lastly, I will say that, as you guys know, and I'm preaching to the choir on this, it's more important than ever to have supports for our kids as we move into summer, and things like summer employment, which a lot of times can be a great benefit and really help reduce violence in the community. I've been really happy, and Joy's again done a lot of this work with the city, that the city of Denver is still going to have a youth employment program this summer. A lot of communities have decided not to do it because it was too difficult. Denver is actually leading into that problem, and we're working closely with DPS Faces Group, and they have done a tremendous job in creating a platform where we can do some virtual job readiness, career exploration, where the kids will still get a stipend and still get paid for their time. So we can also send that link to you guys as well too, because we're still continuing to register kids for that summer employment program as well.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I will share both of those links on our Facebook page. And if folks want an individual email, put it into the chat, and we'll make sure you get both the notes from today's event as well as the links that have been shared. I just want to mention a couple things before we sign off. We've got other questions in the queue that we want to make sure that we get answered. Commander, I'll reach out to you perhaps when you're back in the office about possibly getting a speed truck on Kentucky. I know a lot of folks have contacted our office as well as to this event about just consistent speeding along that corridor. The one thing that I wanted to mention to folks was that you may have heard that the city announced 8 furlough days for city employees. That does not include Denver Police Department. Am I correct in that, Commander?
Yes, you are.
Okay. And so just wanted folks to know that piece as well. Any other questions that you have? I know all 3 of our council offices would be happy to try to figure out how to address any answers, any solutions in the coming months. Commander, there was one question that I was also curious about. Of the incidents that took place in April, were any arrests made in those particular crimes?
There are, and I saw that question come through. I think I'd mentioned 18 victims during that 1 week. But there's been arrests made in several of those. I don't have the exact number. The first number that comes into my head is 4, but I have to go back and check that. But I know that there was some interest in the double homicide that happened on South Tennyson on April 11th. There has been 1 arrest made on that. It was the arrest of a juvenile individual, male, that had involvement in that. And I don't know how much time we have. I can run through that real quick if anybody is interested in what happened and or not.
Yeah, if you can do it in about a minute, that'd be great.
I can do that. If there are anybody out there that doesn't know about that that incident on April 11th, it's happened in the 1600 block of South Tennyson. There was a group of kids that were confronted by the dad of one of the kids that was in that group. They were coming back, actually walking back from a park back to a house in that neighborhood. The father of that kid, he's actually deceased right now. He was one of the ones who died in that shootout. Had concerns over his son's involvement within that group, and he started to express them. That escalated, got way out of control. Guns were drawn from on both sides of it. There were actually 3 people that ended up getting shot. 2 passed away, including 1 juvenile male. There were some self-defense issues with some of that went on. So there was maybe 1 or 2 people that were actually had fired a gun that aren't being able to be prosecuted because of those self-defense issues. But there was 1 juvenile male that was ultimately arrested. I think he was 16 years old. Within that, we do not anticipate any more arrests connected with that particular incident.
Thank you so much for that brief description. I want to thank everyone for coming on. Commander, especially thanks to you. I know you're recovering from surgery, and we wish you all the best with that. Would my fellow council members like to say any sign-off comments?
This is Councilman Flynn. Yes, thank you again, Councilwoman Torres, for organizing this. And it looks like we got to most of the questions. But if anybody still has questions that are remaining here, I saw on a chat about speeding not only on Kentucky, but also on Jewel and some of these wide open avenues that have no stop signs, no traffic signs. They probably fall within the guidelines for using the photo radar van. And maybe it's time to talk about deploying those not only on Kentucky, but also on Federal, on Jewel, between Federal and Sheridan.
Great idea. Councilman Clark?
Just thank you to everybody. Thanks for being here.
All right. And we'll see if we can do another one of these over the summer. We'll try to get information out to everyone, and we appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.